Hey, what's going on, guys? Um, Man, there's people already out there. That's fantastic. So here we are. It's a rainy Sunday afternoon. So rainy, in fact, that I had planned to make a video doing this stuff, right? You get what I'm saying? And it was going to be like an actual video with actual editing. But life sort of gets busy on the weekends. Had a few things to do today. And anybody that watches this channel knows that when it comes to a rainy Sunday, that's comic book time because that's when, as a kid, when it'd be raining and you couldn't go outside, you get a stack of comic books and you would just jump right on top of that bed with a stack of comics and spend the day reading it. Well, what happened today is after we did everything we needed to do in the house and came home and I fell asleep for an hour. So there'll be a video on this that'll be shortened. So we can call this a dry run. We can say this is like the, the director's cut, because, who knows how long we'll go with this. But I had a few thoughts and I was really wanting to get back into making regular videos, at least every now and then. So thanks for everybody that's popped up here tonight to play around. First thing I do is kick the camera. Go figure. So there's a new setup. I'm experimenting with things. Got a tripod and all that stuff. So anybody that watches this show, maybe this will work, maybe it won't. Who knows? So right off the bat, we've got the usual cast of suspects out there. We got John C. We got Sanctuary of Reality, who I have always kind of push his channel there to people when he pops in. Basically, he has reviewed all 300 issues of Cerebus on his channel, issue by issue. And this afternoon, while I was relaxing on the couch right before I fell asleep, I finished off Flight. That's a chapter of Cerebus for you guys in the phone books. So I'm that far up. Okay. Good to see him. And we got the Victor Thomas here, which is fantastic. And we got Stay Puft. 1983, another person whose channel I always kind of push for people to go watch his live shows and whatnot and whatever he has going on. Also, he's on Instagram. A lot of us hang out on Instagram do some stuff. So I'm one of those people that, like, if you really want a video to pop or you want to kind of talk Marvel Comics, it's really, really hard to be kind of positive with what's going on today. So maybe I can kind of explain why, at least with some people, seasoned guys, seasoned collectors, if you will, guys have been doing this for a long time. There'll be a little story time with this and stuff, explaining why I popped up Marvel Saga here, right? But Marvel Saga started out in 1985, ran 25 issues, and ended in 1987. This is right smack in the dab of me being in middle school. Now, up to this point, I've always kind of talked about how when I started collecting comics, it was the uncle and stepdad's books in the house, all comics all over the place around 1977 when I was 4 and was able to be coherent enough to actually be able to read a little bit and to kind of enjoy these. And it wasn't like being an adult, or maybe it is for some people, being an adult reading these things, is that when you actually saw the cover and actually got inside of the book, you really were transferred to another world. You journeyed, you were in there. And one of the things that really stuck out was the fact that Marvel Comics, I read, and would have little editor notes. Now, the first issue of X-Men that I can recall reading was probably the stepdad's issue of number 3, The Blob. That was, like I said, that was probably, when I was about 4 or 5. Fast forward about 2 or 3 years, I met a friend named John who was older, and he showed me where the X-Men were in the present day at the time, right in the middle of the Dark Phoenix saga. So if you've ever looked at those two books and those two different eras that are probably, 17, 16 years apart, that's quite jarring. So I had reading everything that was coming out, old comics, the new comics that the uncle and stepdad would have in their magazines and everything. And you kind of tried to put it in order in your head with what was going on. No long boxes. Okay. No comic book shops, no comic magazines, no Comics Buyer's Guide, nothing like that. It was all exactly what you see in front of you. It was the comic. It was the splash page. It was it was the legal stuff in here. It was the letter columns. It was the advertisements. The work stood on its own, and you started recognizing names that were in there. Oh, Eric Breen is here. Marvel in 2021 makes one wish they'd learn to read, not read in the first place. Well, that's kind of what we might touch on here and stuff, right? So anyway, by the time I got to middle school, and I would love to show pictures of myself here because, like I said, my stories, I don't tell to be talking about myself, but it's just a lot of the stuff with comics is just intertwined with what it makes me remember and stuff, right? But anyway, with having all these books coming out, and I completely understood the DC universe, the multiverse, Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3. There were some things you just had to look over. If you were going to believe in comic book science, you could also believe in multiple Earths and stuff like that. So I completely understood them. So in 1985, this was a happening year, okay? You had Marvel Saga coming out where they were celebrating and looking back on their history. And I think a lot of this led up because in the next year it was their 25th anniversary in 1986. So that's what I feel had happened with why they did a book called Marvel Saga. Also at the same time, you had Crisis on Infinite Earths going on over at DC. And then right around the corner, you had books like Watchmen and The Dark Knight. So to be in this era, even though I didn't have access to anything that wasn't on a spinner rack, I had my Squadron Supreme by Mark Grunwald. That was my Watchmen. I didn't get to read Watchmen until 1988, a few years later. But Marvel Saga was a book that was very important on me becoming knowledgeable of comics. And it's also why I have a question about why Marvel abandoned their continuity when they had material here to get a lot of people caught up. I'm of the mind that if you're going to work in comics, you should have at least read them growing up, in my opinion. Is that fair? Maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Oh, wow, what do we got here? Some comments are really good. We've gone from Marvel Saga to Marvel Voices. Let that sink in or just sink. Yeah, Marvel. There's people out there who are not the seasoned collectors we are, and I feel really sorry for them because if they've come in during the last decade of comics, this is all foreign to them. When you're younger, you like things to be new. You like to feel like it's kind of your world and it's not of the old, if you will. But unfortunately, with comics and anything that's a sequential art and serialized, it all ties together regardless. That's one of the unique things about comics. Comics stand out as a medium all of their own that other franchises, other mediums, other anything they can't. Anyway, but getting into this, the stories that come in with this Marvel Saga, because I'm going to go back to 7th grade with you, and I'm going on, oh my God, possibly a 34, 35-year-old memory here, but I remember the work well. Oh, how funny. I got my bookmark in here from the last time I sat down to read these. But anyway, you're going to see I have 2 copies here, right? And I've lost issues over the years because these were books that I studied. I mean, you talk about people sitting down and eating a meal and inhaling their meal. Well, that's what this Marvel Saga was because it put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And I was very happy when I found out I was right about a few things. And there was a few things that were just extraordinary how they fit together in that puzzle. Now, I got to be more forgiving because what are you in 7th grade, 12, 13 years old? I worked in schools for 6 years. And it was elementary and middle school kids I worked with. I was a therapeutic day counselor. I was contracted to schools, didn't work, wasn't part of the school system per se, but I'm the guy that would work with the bullies, the kids with special needs and problems and that kind of thing, right? Anyway, but what I've seen is that in 6th grade, the kids are all right. They're grown up. They're figuring out stuff. 7th grade, they lose their minds. I don't know if it's adolescence / puberty hitting. And then in 8th grade, they come back to you. So there's a whole thing about what was going on with me. But in 7th grade math, if you will, there was a huge problem with people talking in class. And yes, it was mostly the 12 and 13-year-old girls talking, right? And of course, the math teacher had enough. And she said that the next person caught talking gets to do something like a 7-page paper report, and it has to be a page a day. Or, so I got in trouble quite a bit. I felt harmless, but I got in trouble quite a bit. Or it was a 5-page paper every day for five days. I ended up getting both at some point, which is why I get it confused with this class. So what did I do it on? I did it on the Marvel Saga. Okay, and I'm not saying that what I was writing was sheer poetry, because I was one of those kids that was bored to death in school, could get straight A's without a problem. And I don't feel like that's bragging. I think that says more about what was going on in school, to tell you the truth. And in 7th grade, the summer before, I got braces. So the buck teeth that I had that would walk through a door before I did had almost immediately started getting set right. And I ended up making out with 3 girls behind the lockers in the first 2 months, after years of either having no front teeth or having the buck teeth, which is one of the reasons why I don't embrace the terms nerd culture or geek culture or whatever it is. Those are hurtful words. And let me tell you, brother, when you have the buck teeth that are all 4 of them will walk through a door before you do, or you couldn't play football because they would tackle somebody in the head 2 steps before you even got to them. It wasn't always, you were a bit of a target, let's put it that way. Okay, so I ended up doing this, and this is what I'm saying. This channel was built up on me being knowledgeable about comics, history of behind the scenes, what was going on in comics. And this may have been where it all came together for me, because I ended up studying these books and doing a freaking report that was supposed to be punishment. Now, the funny thing was, it was supposed to be in for 5 days. Well, I remember on the Friday after I put in the last paper, I was just sitting there and the teacher jumped on me for something. I was not doing anything, and I got 2 more days. Well, I met this teacher I was about 22, so 10, 11 years later, whatever. I ended up meeting her at a local bar in town. Local band was playing. It wasn't a seedy bar at the time, had a restaurant in it also, you know what I'm saying? And we ended up sitting down, and she admitted that she was so enthralled with this report that I was doing, talking about the Marvel history in the Marvel universe with all their heroes and stuff. She gave me 2 more days to make sure that I finished and got it all. And she was having a big old laugh about it. And I was just like, you bitch. But anyway, I mean, you just totally ruined my weekend. So again, the story that was going on, I've talked about that. One of the first great robberies I had in my comic book collection was with the Asgardian Wars and a few other books from that year. New Mutant Special #1 by Art Adams. If you go back, it's where the New Mutants started out and ended up on Asgard, and the X-Men soon followed. Storm didn't have powers. It was just fantastic. Started out with an X-Men Alpha Flight two crossover in it, but it wasn't really a crossover. It was a 2-issue miniseries with Chris Claremont and Paul Smith. And then it went through a New Mutant Special and an X-Men annual. And it was fantastic. Get the trade. Just fantastic stuff, right? Well, that was ripped off of me. And the guy who did it, I actually got some revenge. I ended up apparently taking some of his books. Those are his initials in the book, because he stole them. And when he had his mother's house and he had his father's house, they were divorced. And this is what he had at his father's house. And you talk about busting right through his dad, going straight into his room, finding him in his room saying, "Where's my damn books?" And I looked straight at him, and I just grabbed a handful of books, and this happened to be in it. If I wasn't going to get my books back because I didn't know where his mom lived, I'm getting my revenge. Okay, Eric Breen got another one. In my day, you guarded the fact that you were into comics like a superhero guarded his secret identity. Yeah. This I was aware of the stigma, and I may have I had a few problems when people found out I read comics. I've said it before. I try not to be a broke record, but my whole deal was is I really didn't care. I got the fact that people didn't like comics. I got the fact that it wasn't really something you wanted to bring up. The other person didn't bring comics, but I just had this attitude they were the ones missing out. So there was no shame ever on my part with this. I can honestly say that. But it was interesting. In my junior year of school, I was dating a girl and I let her hang out in my room while I took a shower. And when I came out, she was gone. She took off. And I look over in my closet. And at that point in time, my whole collection fit in that closet. I had literally had my hobby in a closet. Go figure. How's that for a real life coincidental metaphor? She had took off. She saw the comics and took off. So yeah, this is real. About the stigma of comics, and I say it's still there, even though it's not the sharp dagger that would come at you. It's more of a blunt instrument, more like a mace, like a cleric in D&D would carry. But a year later, the same thing happened with another girl I was dating. Go figure. And it was literally the comic books. That's really the only time I can really thank the comic books. I dated a girl once or twice, I think in my 20s or maybe my 30s. I don't know. I have a 7-year, I was married there for a little bit. But I just remember one girl kind of looking at me like, oh, you're one of those. Like she had run across our kind before, So that's really been about it. All right. What do we got here? And now we're going to finally get to the comics. Yeah, we had a very small group of guys who read comic books back in the 80s. Yeah, it was one of those things you'd be on the bus, or when we first came into school, you sat in the gym or you sat in the cafeteria waiting for that bell to ring while everybody got off the buses and stuff. And if you looked around, you might have caught with your peripheral vision or something, somebody holding. It was always John Byrne. It seemed like it was always a John Byrne book, Man of Steel, X-Men. In kindergarten, we got on the buses, and it was by age or grade. Kindergarten kids would get on, sit on the front row, the front seats, and then it would go all the way back to fifth grade to the back seat. Around the fourth grade section, kindergarten came out last. They'd call fifth graders first, but this is 1978. I looked back and I saw some fourth graders there, and they had a stack of books like this, and it had to have been Adventure Comics or something. And I was like just biting at the tooth to jump back there to go see what they were talking about, because the kid was showing up his books. And whatever the comic was, I'll never find it. I've accepted that. But he held up one. I saw this pinup page where it was Hawkman standing on a wing of a jet, and he had his helmet off, and he had black hair, and he was holding his helmet underneath his arm, and he was sitting there waving at the guy, at the pilot driving the jet, just waving at him. The guy looked like he was freaking out, and the clouds were all around him. It was really, I was like, damn, what was that? I've always wondered what that book was. Okay, so with Marvel Saga here, this is where you kind of got what was made Marvel special. One of the many things that made them just sort of rise to be the cream of the crop there. The number one company there for a long time. What made them special, and it was the whole idea that this really was a shared universe. There was a continuity. Now, one of the reasons I kind of made peace about Stan Lee after some of the things, I never was a Stan Lee guy. I was a Kirby guy. Okay, let's get that out of the way. But the one thing, I wouldn't say I villainized Stan Lee, but it just drove me nuts about all the credit he would get when all the credit was not his. But one of the things that did make me sort of have peace about Stan Lee was the fact that he steered the ship. This continuity, in my opinion, wouldn't have been held and established and built on if it wasn't for one guy keeping it all together. Okay. So it was part of this continuity with all these comics and try to make it feel like one universe that people invested their time in. That's what made it special. There was people who sort of studied this and celebrated this. They felt like they were on the same team. You felt like you were on part of the same company if you read the letters columns and stuff where people would bring up things. And then Mark Ruwald came up with the idea of a no prize. If there is a problem with continuity or some sort of mess up in the story, and you came up with a rational explanation, they would print your letter and said comic book series with your explanation, you would get a no prize. And what I heard is that it was a empty envelope. It's a no prize. So this was just it. It wasn't just a comic book company having one job of putting out these stories and keeping this universe together as they built on it and stuck things in there. It was also the idea that this is yours and you're helping out with it. If you, instead of just bashing them, saying, how could you mess that up? Did you not read what happened? And the third panel of page 10 of Fantastic Four number 87 to turn around and have that character pop up in Avengers 122. And that's not possible. Well, you would come up with the idea and get a no prize for it at some point, right? So Marvel Saga opens up here, and you had people who kind of took the reins up being continuity kings, and that's one of the things that a guy named Mark Grunwald was famous for, right? You also had this researcher here who I could talk about, a guy named Pete Sanderson, right? Pete Sanderson. Now, Pete Sanderson was a dude that got hired to read comics. It was amazing. You need to Wikipedia the guy or Google him or something, right? Because I could talk forever about him, but I don't know exactly how accurate I am. But anyway, Pete Sanderson actually got hired to read every comic DC comic had ever put out in order to help with research and do notes for Marv Wolfman and the editors and the crew and the writers at DC for due to Crisis on Infinite Earths coming out, right? And it was those notes and stuff. They didn't put them to waste. They ended up doing Who's Who at DC, right? Well, whatever happened, I've heard 2-3 tales of how it happened. I don't know if he was headhunted, but he comes over to Marvel to pretty much kind of do the same thing, and he becomes the writer and researcher for Marvel Saga, and also for I believe I got it here somewhere. Let me find it. Yeah, for the official handbook of the Marvel Universe. All right. So, Tim, you're being long-winded. We've been sitting here waiting for you to read the book. Well, all of this kind of is trying to show you a picture that this was something that Marvel took care of, and Marvel knew what they had. This the fact that they published all this material and actually documented it in a way, and they came up with this whole idea of taking all their comic books, even though that the Fantastic Four #1 came out in 1961, but they go all the way up to Alpha Flight here to 1983, where John Byrne had written a story or a part of a story that was in the past. This pulls in stories from Eternals and Avengers and Alpha Flight. Even though the Marvel Universe comics started in 1961, there's a history here. And they came together, researched it, put it all together, and gave you all the way up until Galactus came and the coming of Galactus. Okay. That's why there's only 25 issues. This is probably the first, 6 or 7 years of the Marvel Universe, all put together for you from the actual comics with research. So let me read what they have in here. This is by Danny Fingeroth. Where's his name at? You know me and names, guys. You can't make fun of a guy that can't pronounce a name because he learned it by reading. At least that's what Glenn Danzig says. But anyway, it says, welcome to the Marvel Saga. In the pages of the monthly series, we will embark on a journey through the wondrous history of the Marvel Universe in a way that no one ever has before. Now, for the first time, the entire sprawling body of events that is Marvel history, events that you've been clued into the bits and pieces over nearly 25 years of comics, is finally available in a sequential narrative form. This is the essence of the Marvel Saga. As the saga progresses, you will see how all the various Marvel series interrelate. You'll see how the stories of the Eternals, Alpha Flight, and Fantastic Four are actually tightly interwoven. You'll see the roots of events that years later will dramatically unfold in the lives of characters as diverse. Before that was diverse. You hear that? There was diversity in comics before people wanted to make that a buzzword, if you will. Okay. As the diverse as the Rawhide Kid and Galactus. Now, I was a two-gun kid guy. We'll just put it out there when it came to a Western. I'm not a big Western fan, but if it's a good one, I'm there. And, of course, you'll see the incredible origins of your favorite characters, the significant events of their lives and careers, and how they fit together like the pieces of an incredibly elaborate puzzle, enabling you to see exactly when and how all the events transpired in relation to all the others. But as important as all the above is one special fact. The series is designed for maximum impact as an exciting story. Read through the issues and you'll see. We've taken sequences from many diverse sources along with some newly drawn material and crafted it into a story you'll never forget. As I was saying at the beginning, this issue, for instance, has material from 12 different sources, ranging from Fantastic Four #1 to Alpha Flight #3. Talk about far ends of the Marvel spectrum. How do we incorporate such diverse material? You'll see inside. And by the way, nothing has been made up for this history. Its information was not presented somewhere. If information was not presented somewhere in a Marvel comic, it won't be in Marvel Saga. But enough preamble. Read on and see how comics' foremost historian and a terrific writer to boot, Peter Sanderson, who did so much of the research and writing of the Marvel Universe Handbook, which I just showed, has taken all the wonderfully diverse material provided by Marvel creators past and present and crafted into the greatest saga of all, the Marvel Saga. P.S. Saga is just the opening event celebrating Marvel's first quarter century, one that begins a little before the big anniversary, and you'll keep on going for a long while after it's over. But keep a lookout for the others. They're coming soon, and they're wild. So how can you not read that? It says specifically what it is. We've got this great continuity. Here it is for you, and we've done it in story form, in an entertaining form, not just like this dry, like a history book or something. They still went out there, and I completely forgot. I mean, I knew the material for the covers were brand new. I think this is a John Byrne cover. Might be a Ron Friends cover. It says on the inside, Tim. Why don't you just look? Ron Fringe and Al Milgrom did 5 new pages. Ron Fringe and Bob Layton did the cover art. So new covers, new materials, and to open this up, Al Milgrom and Bob Layton? No, Ron Fringe and Al Milgrom, excuse me. They kind of give you how the saga begins, the book 1, talking about the Eternals and then humans and the gods and World War II and the Cowboys and Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos in World War II. Now, it was kind of funny because Marvels in the 90s, when Kurt Busiek did research and he wrote Marvels with Alex Ross, if you go back and read that, that's the Silver Age. And he took all the pieces that Stan Lee did on his own, and he figured out things like the Night of Sentinels, where the Sentinels attacked the X-Men for the first time. The only place it could have fit in Marvel continuity was the night that Reed Richards and Sue Storm were getting married. He started figuring out things like that. I always wondered if they did not just pick up, Marvel Saga and read through it. We get our cast of characters. We get things from Thing #1. They cited their work from what comics they got. In this book, we got Fantastic Four #1, 2, 271, 273. And they give you the years at least the cover dates those books came out. Tales to Astonish, Avengers, 227 from 1983, Alpha Flights, #2, 3, and 12, The Thing #1 at the time. Material by Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, H.E. Huntley, John Byrne. Those were the writers. And the artists they pulled from were Jack Kirby, John Byrne, Don Heck, Ron Wilson, who I've met. Sal Buscema, just Ron Wilson so far. Sal Buscema, I met him. Art Simek, Joe Sennett, met him. Dick Ayers, Hilary Beretta, and Brett Breeding. So you read the stuff, and these were studied by me, okay? I mean, they're pulling out. I mean, I hope these are showing up, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, they just pulled up, and this is where it all came together for me. I recognized these images. I recognized Fantastic Four #1 from reprints. Oh, man. I had the Alpha Flight issues. That was kind of cool to see how they brought him in there. Little Wolverine action in his Weapon X days, Vindicators, and they sort of tell you, like on this page, they give you little, as part of the storytelling, they would fill in the gaps and kind of keep you chronologically in order. So this was fantastic. Here's the Hank Pym before he became Ant-Man, discovering that he was the man trapped in the anthill. And he would later on coming up there, and they give you a little blurb here after showing that story. Hank Pym was just a scientist that ended up coming up with a formula that shrunk him down. But at the end of it, it shows how Hank Pym got rid of the formula, the Pym particles, if you will, because it was too dangerous. But we get Pete Sanderson coming in, and we get our little, Ant-Man costume there, probably from Handbook of the Marvel Universe. But Pym had not destroyed all of his growth potions, and soon he would shrink himself down again to become the original Ant-Man. Later still, he would successfully take on the identities of Giant Man, Goliath, and Yellow Jacket. So they kind of, you could see how they just like, this was the whole shebang. Just great stuff. And I will tell you from what I remember, the Fantastic Four really dominated a lot of these issues. Okay. So yeah, there's my original and the copy that I took. We get the introduction of Spider-Man, how it all fit in, the Thing's original costume and the scrolls and Namor. And they expand. They would still keep talking to you from time to time. It was fantastic stuff. I mean, it was pretty straightforward, but it showed how it all tied together. And you did get the idea that it was a plan. I mean, this was just fantastic stuff. And it was really cool to be finding things that I loved. Like I loved when Jack Kirby did blueprints of Fantastic Four headquarters and whatever else he did, Baxter Buildings. So yeah, you get a little bit of everybody. Kirby, and this is probably how I knew that Kirby was a big driving force at Marvel. It also made me real suspicious. Marvel Saga may have been the one where I'm sitting here thinking that it probably made me suspicious of everything that Stanley had done. All right, let's check this out. I'm going to back up here, check some things. Appreciate everybody that's out there. Wow, you guys have been talking. Okay, we're talking about who's who in here. Vincizno. I just picked up some DC Who's Who's in a 25-cent bin. I say pick everything up like that. Any reference material for that cheap, get them. So Marvel Age is the equivalent. No. The equivalent to DC's Who's Who are the official handbooks, right? They came out with 2 versions. Okay. Here's the ones that I think started in 1982. I had number 1 laid out here somewhere, but then they came out about 3 or 4 years later, I think 1985, and they came out with the deluxe edition, which was just fantastic. The deluxe edition, all the covers connect, every one of them, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Marvel Saga, if you had, I don't know how long you've been around, but if you saw the beginning of the video when I finally got around to it, I even read the inside cover where it explained how they were just telling everything chronologically, pulling from all Marvel comics up till 1985 at this time. Yeah, people are answering you there. And I'll be showing those in a minute, some of those. Okay, you guys are talking amongst yourselves. All right. Dave McKenzie is in here. Kevin Kelly is in here. John C. is in here. Marvel Saga is one of my absolute favorite series. Yeah, I need to get it. So, like I said, I told the story about through these books, and it's really, like I said, Keith Pollard, Joe Sennett, they started bringing in people that were catching up on things. These, to me, are recommended reading for people who want the least, when Marvel really kept up with their continuity. We got the X-Men. I actually love this issue because it finally let me know some of the backup stories from a Bizarre Adventures. Yeah, this one right here, it has a origin. I don't know if it's an origin, but it has a story of Scott Summers before he joined the X-Men, and it was from Bizarre Adventures, number 27, I believe. But anyway, there's a story of Scott Summers I read as a kid that I couldn't find or couldn't figure out. And in my mind, it had to be in an X-Men comic book. And this also let me know that there was magazines out there. We get Hydra, X-Men, the early days of the X-Men. Here it is. It was this story, The Man with the Diamond Hands or something, The Living Diamond. Yeah, this was a story that showed up. I'm not even looking at the camera. Yeah, The Living Diamond. I read that story as a kid in the late 70s and could never find it. So Marvel Saga helped me. I'm pretty sure that was one of my uncle's books that he took when he got out there. And believe it or not, here's how old this is. Do you know what this guy is, guys? This is a piece of my mullet from back in the day. As gross as that is, but yeah, I cut my mullet off, and apparently ended up. That shows you how long I've had these books. I cut this mullet off like in 1992, I think. So there you go. It's kind of gross now that I think about it. You know what? I'm gonna leave it in there. But anyway, it was also with the Marvel Saga live. It's a live show, guys. Sorry, but this also showed me that how different inkers affected Jack Kirby's work. So you had the great Vince Collada, who would come to find out would actually erase things on Jack Kirby's pencils if he didn't feel they were necessary to save time. And of course, he used a whole bunch of assistants to help him. But you get these early stories of Thor, Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom, when Doctor Doom was the badass. And then you would get these covers in the back, so they would reference and cite their material. So moving on here, going back, there's one issue in particular I want to talk about. Oh, man, who did this cover? And as you can see, as the story progressed, like I said, I've had these forever. Never bagged. I mean, I read these and studied these and stuff, but they continued having new material in these and citing the artists. I mean, it just was fantastic. But yeah, the whole a grail of mine. If there's two books that are a grail, like that, if I ever can track down something that's affordable and in good shape, it's going to be a Fantastic Four. I think it's 26 and 27. Hulk versus Thing with the Avengers popping up. Good stuff here. Getting the early X-Men stuff. As you can see, they were kind of pushing the X-Men, showing Iron Man's armors. This is my favorite version of that armor. And then look at that. We got a Klaus Janson cover. Keith Pollard and Klaus Janson with new drawn material inside also. Coming up there with my favorite fight, introduction of, I just fell in love with this stuff, the nostalgia of all of it. Oh, so as you can see, there was a lot of work, a lot of care, and a lot of love made with these books. Here's a famous story that actually got adapted to one of the Fantastic Four cartoons in the 90s. Daredevil popping up helped the Fantastic Four. It was great stuff. But then everything, they did a special issue in the middle of all this, issue number 22. Now, as you can see, we'll see how many seasoned people out there. I'm going to take a minute and let people maybe guess what this is. But basically, this is Marvel Saga number 22, and they stopped everything they were doing just to focus on Mary Jane and Peter. Can anybody guess why? Can anybody guess why? What was coming up? What was happening? But anyway, I'm not going to wait for everybody to guess. Y'all know it. But anyway, it was because Mary Jane and Peter Parker were getting married. So they did a whole issue on the history of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's romance. And man, talk about pulling from a lot of Spider-Man books. Spectacular Spider-Man books. Archie Goodwin, Len Wein, Roger Stern, Steve Ditko. So you got like a complete history and a rundown all the way to that one of the most famous panels in comics, or at least it used to be. Hey, Tiger, hey, face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. They led up a whole lot on Peter Parker meeting Mary Jane for several issues where you never saw her face and things were always happening where Peter couldn't meet her. But like I said, they led up to number 25, the coming of Galactus and the debut of the Silver Surfer. That's where they ended the series. So you have this reference material for the Silver Age, basically, minus a few years, okay? Fast forward years later, was it 2004? And things were happening before this, don't get me wrong, okay? But to me, this is the benchmark. This is right when Marvel was putting it in your face if you hadn't got these subtle hints about hating continuity. And here's Avengers Disassembled, Brian Bendis popping up on the Avengers for the first time, Avengers 503 of a part 4 story called Chaos with WandaVision going on. This ties into Wanda's madness, if you will. Going on there, where the Avengers were disassembled. They ended the series, if you will, and all of a sudden it became like Bendisverse. If you want a true bookend, if you will, to go with Fantastic Four #1, go through the Marvel Universe in one man's opinion here, it's actually 2 series. If you want the Marvel style book, where it sort of also looked at the histories, get JLA, Justice League of America versus the Avengers by Kurt Busiek and George Perez. And then also go out and get Earth X by Jim Kruger and Alex Ross. That to me is the actual bookend for how the Marvel Universe should have ended. Or you could also pick Future Imperfect by the Hulk. Okay, so it's all up to you. All right, but to me, those were the true ends for what was Marvel with its continuity. Joe Quesada had come on as editor-in-chief. He had pulled Marvel out of a very bad situation where they had filed bankruptcy protection. He had done the Marvel Knights line where he took 4 books and they became big hits and different degrees, if you will. And he had become an editor-in-chief of Avengers. Changed quite a bit, made some very smart calls to get them out of, like the Justice League versus Avengers book. He got the history of what happened behind the scenes, where it found out it was just a pissing contest between Jim Shooter and people at DC. And he got that going. He got a lot of great events going, a lot of launches. Then he brought in a bunch of indie guys at the time. Mike Allred came on X-Force, some indie writers, rejuvenated some books, turned them into ecstatics, things like that. Things were happening. Things were hitting big. This was also around the era that you had like The Authority by Warren Ellis taking off and Brian Hitch taking off. Ultimate Universe and stuff had been gaining momentum. And things like that were going on. And all this, and at the same time, you had Joe Quesada doing interviews, and he was making comments that continuity kind of held great stories back. So they were starting to slowly abandon their continuity. Now, abandoning continuity was one thing, but completely abandoning the characteristics and a lot of this history that they have reference for, to me, is inexcusable. I mean, it's one thing to be fast and loose, but you started writing characters out of character and people noticed. And I've always come up with the idea that it was because a lot of people did not grow up reading Marvel comics or comics in general, or something was going on. You know what I mean? Like, have these people ever read a comic with what was going on? Bendis, he's a real easy target, in my opinion, is just a failed script writer who wanted to be a writer and fell into comics. The guy writes fantastic crime stories and cops. He actually would drive around with policemen and stuff to get like the dialogue and stuff, right? So that's sort of a half slam and stuff, right? But the source material is here for people who have not, maybe they haven't read comics forever and stuff. The source material is out there with everything that's out here. Who's Who is pretty simple. Great artists, great art. Just notes from a dude Pete Sanderson, who would find that first issue that these characters had shown up in, with a brief history and some little bit of powers. And then you had the stuff that Marvel Universe, they put out 1 volume and they got the research down and the characters, and they went into depth with power levels and skills and essays pretty much with each character, to where they came out a few years later and they did a deluxe edition building on that. So even if you're not into comics, and even though these are dated, even though all of this stuff came out in the 80s up until the early 90s, and they have had more versions of these official handbook of the Marvel universes, but they would end up having a theme. Like you had your horror characters or your Avenger characters and stuff. I think they did those all the way up until the early 2000s off and on. They had them in spiral notebooks. And when I say spiral notebooks, you would get a stack. You would buy a packet that you could take apart, and they already had 3 holes in them, so you get a notebook and you could arrange them however you wanted. So there's tons of them. I could reach back here and get a few. So the material is out there. There's really no excuse for this. So when they lost the continuity, they also turned around and they lost the oh man, I can't believe I'm forgetting the word. The word where, as fans, we feel like we are helping build this stuff. The interaction in between the audience and the people making the product, if you will, right? The no prize, the continuity, it being a part of it and feeling a part of it, and being able to come up with ideas of how continuity got screwed up and having the reader fix it, really took away a lot of venom from people, because instead of arguing with somebody or just letting them sit there and seethe and foam at the mouth, they were like, hey, come on over here and help, guys, help. They made them part of the problem and part of the solution. So when you look back on the last couple of years, where we go from what I was talking about, Avengers disassembled, and guys, I'm really breaking this down in the simplest of terms, right? I'm covering decades of comics, and I'm skipping over bunches of things that have happened that caused a great decline in quality and a great decline in the breakdown of the audience with Marvel, if they've ever really cared. I've been told they really haven't. Some people haven't really cared. But with Avengers disassembled, I mean, we didn't realize it at the time, but they were like right in our face saying, the Marvel Universe is about to be disassembled. Characters were acting out of character. Things were going on that you just shook your head on that couldn't be possible. They did one last nod with Scarlet Witch's history, if you will, in this. And they started coming out with the idea that they were acting like it was part of the plan. When people were starting to say things, people who were still in Marvel Comics still had that interaction with their audience at the time, where the audience had a little bit of battered wife syndrome. Marvel could smack you like a husband smacking a wife, and then I'll come back, baby. We won't do it again. We'll work things out and things go good for a while. So when the audience started catching on that people weren't acting right in these comics, they were ignoring continuity, Marvel tried to come off like it's all part of a plan, and we got Secret Invasion, where you didn't know who was a Skrull and who wasn't. So this was one of the things they came up with. So people, I guess, to try to act like, of course people aren't acting right. Of course continuity is screwed up, because you don't know who's been a Skrull, and you don't know how long they haven't been, how long the Skrull has been around, acting like other heroes. And that's where Secret Invasion came from. And I hated that. That was not something that was building up a universe. That was leading us on a trail to where we got something like Secret Empire. By this time, this unreadable piece of crap came out. They didn't just abandon the Marvel Universe. They tried to completely rewrite it and say that it was wrong to begin with. They just totally flipped the side, just flipped what they were doing. Now, this is just a comic book story. Nobody really talks about it anymore. But they were even taking pot shots at their audience in this book. Maybe it was, or maybe the writer was being allowed to take pot shots, or they were just turning a blind eye. But even when fans were getting outraged about this story, Red Skrull actually said a line like, I'm sure the outrage on Twitter will be, immaculate or something, right? So just to kind of watch Marvel Comics go downhill over the years, I actually had a mourning period, not good morning, like somebody died, mourning period, knowing what was coming, knowing what was hitting. And for them to just abandon all of this source material, abandon something that made the company a name, a reputation. Now, we can talk about the years of comics almost, the bubble almost busting, Marvel filed for bankruptcy. Now, that's one thing. That's a business side of it. But you also got to understand there's an integrity and a reputation that is important, because it's through word of mouth and having a fandom. And the way that Marvel it just cracks me up, because not only did Marvel abandon what made them special, but what also made them special was their, how they got along with their fans, how they made a part of it. Now, that's just not some guy who reads comics being bitter, saying, how dare they turn their back on me. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying people like Kurt Busiek, who I mentioned, there was people who wrote letters to the companies in the letter columns, and would talk when the editors got to know them. They ended up working in the comic book industry. You follow what I'm saying? They track these things. Okay. Different world. I get it. But I just think it's kind of funny that as they abandon their continuity, they also abandon and destroyed their reputation. You know what I mean? And if there's I would rather, and I've done it before, I would rather go broke than to have my reputation that I built ruined. And I'm not talking about worrying. I'm not talking about the reputation of, I'm competing with my next door neighbor to see who has the most toys when we die. I'm not talking about worrying so much what people think about me on petty stuff and things like that. I'm talking about knowing that if I put my dollar down, I'm going to get a certain amount of quality, and you guys are going to be invested in this Marvel universe as you have made me invested in it. Does that make sense? I could go on and on about that. It's one of those things where it's such a broad topic in my mind about what Marvel has lost reputation wise that I feel like I would just be running around the bush before I'd hit the target. I'd go round and round. So let's check some of these comments while I have been talking. Man. Oh, I saw some good one, guys. Let me put my glasses on. I'm getting old, guys. I'm getting old. There we go. Oh, look at this. Dave McKin- the wedding tie-in. You guys were right on it. Now I know where to start. We're just going to start right here. Dave McKenzie, I have my Marvel Saga 22 next to my 2 versions of the wedding issue. Nice. You guys were right on it. And that's another thing. That's what I wanted to bring up, right? I'm not going to say I lost my train of thought. I just kind of glossed over it, thinking I was going to come back to it. So I appreciate you guys commenting to remind me and stuff. But that was another thing. Not only did Marvel abandon their continuity, I mean, like I said, I totally get loosening things up to grow the universe, to change with the times. So much of the Marvel universe is tied into 50s sci-fi and radiation and Vietnam War and 60s culture and things like that. That I totally get loosening things up. But they were retconning things that didn't need to be retconned. And Marvel ended up getting big time egg on their face with their reputation. This is what I'm talking about. Anybody that knows the One More Day issue, the One More Day story, where they turned around and they made it to where Mary Jane and Peter Parker were never married. For whatever reason, Marvel really had a problem. They said it was marketing. Marvel started having a problem with characters being married because they wanted younger readers, is what they were saying, and a young reader can't relate to a married man, if you will, or whatever, right? And I always thought that was pure crap with what they were saying, right? So they had it to where you couldn't smoke in a Marvel comic. It's their comics, their call. Can't smoke in a Marvel comic. And apparently you can't be married either, but you can make a deal with the devil. And they gave Mephisto out of nowhere universe altering powers, to make it to where Mary Jane and Peter were never married. And they actually made it to where it was Mary Jane, I think, that had they kept Peter's hands clean. It was Mary Jane who made the decision, if you will. But that's what I'm saying. It wasn't, they didn't just abandon the continuity. It's like all of a sudden they started wiping their ass with it, which made no sense to me. What were they hating so much? That's what got me. I mean, that's what it felt like. It felt like hate. You felt like something else was going on. And after being invested in this and seeing that reputation and the relationship they had built with the readers, why just abandon all that? You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it started getting to where they were saying, we are the dream makers. You know, we are the music makers. We are the dream makers. They were trying to tell us that they were giving us what we need, not what we not wanted. Now I want to skip over to DC. I remembered that comment they made. And at this point, things weren't as venomous, as tense as they are now. That all started with Dan Slott really bringing that to a forefront on Twitter around 2010 or 11 or something. I was there when it happened. So again, it was that battered wife syndrome. They started making little comments like that. It was like, just talk about just burning bridges, all because they supposedly wanted a younger audience around. They weren't getting a younger audience. They were tired of the older guys who knew more about the comics than the people who were coming in there to work. Oh, they moved in together. If only Batman and Catwoman could get married. They enter sarcasm on that. Fantastic. Let's get through these, and I'm going to get a little drink here and see if I can go on. What we got here? Gore Vidal. Continuity, I don't think matters anymore. As DC Crisis was supposed to clear things up going on 35 years, it's still an infinite crisis made worse by New 52, Rebirth, Doomsday Clock, and Death Metal. Yeah. Maybe I'll go on a rant about that stuff here in a minute. The age of rubber stamp editors begins. Nice. Here we go. Continuity is what drew me into comics between 1978 and 2004. Maybe it's my growing up within my own paradigm, but I'm not drawn to today's comics. However, I'm drawn to older reprints. Well, today's comics are not stories per se. Well, let me back up there. I'm painting with a broad brush with that topic, that comment, right? What I have read of Marvel over the last 5 or 6 years, number one, it takes me 30 seconds, it feels like, to read a Marvel comic. So I read a bunch of them before I even left the store and put them back up there. They're not stories. They're not using thought bubbles. There's no what's the word I'm looking for? Introspective. I took a long nap before this, guys, about an hour's worth. So I'm making excuses. But anyway, we don't delve into the character like they used to. There's no exposition out there like Claremont would put in there, or go read the first issue of Namor that John Byrne wrote. That's like number 26, I think, when Jay Lee first popped up on it, talking about trees and paper and the environment and stuff. Like the narration is gone from them, and it's all about writers using these characters to voice their opinions, not what the characters are or who they are. That's gone. It's almost like every time they see a book that is doing that, somebody is yelling, "Hey, over here, we got one that's gone stray," you know. So they're out there, but they really lost it there for a long time. Okay. So yeah. Marvel abused us. That's hilarious. Like I said, I've always, for years, that's one of the good things about having this documented in my YouTube videos. For years, I've called it battered wife syndrome when it comes to comics, Marvel mainly, and their audience. You know, you reach a point where you finally leave after you've been smacked around enough. Yeah. Kevin Kelly, Secret Empire was tragic, so awful and unreadable. I thought Secret Invasion was just about everything that came out after that. Okay, Matthew Rasco. Okay. Whoops. What happened? Okay, guys, it updated. Let me get up here. I really want that comment, guys. Sorry. Here we go. Eric Breen, to be fair, Bill Jamis left the Marvel Universe. He would go to hell during his tenure. I will defend House of M through Siege, out of character, warts and all. Now, here's the thing. This is one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of videos coming from me that's real negative. Because if you like Secret Empire, if you like Secret Invasion, if you like this House of M, if you like this the Siege and things like that, I actually have zero problem with that. You know what I mean? This is one man's opinion talking. It's not me trying to convince you those are crap. But if we really went back and forth in a friendly, spirited debate here, I will point out why they're bad, but I'm not going to crap on it and needlessly if you like it. I'm a guy that the Age of Apocalypse came out in the 90s, and I ended up liking it years later. You know what I mean? I could pick up Siege and maybe 5 years from now like it. Who knows? You know what I mean? So yeah, if you like any of these things, guys, this is not an attack on you. Okay? That's cool. You know what I mean? But like I said, if we go back and forth and have a debate, I'm going to point out some things, in which I'm sure you would be welcome to also with something I liked. You get what I'm saying? It's all about civility and respect on a personal level. What do we got here? I have here where comic book history stops for me. It's kind of like how I stop at the first 3 Star Wars films. And that's a lot of what's happening today that I'm seeing. A lot of people have finally just reached a point, and they've been doing it for years. It's not a new thing, but it seems like people are losing patience or whatever, or just exhausted. And they just moved on, and they are getting back issues and trying other new books. I've been hitting eBay quite a bit, and I've been getting some fantastic deals on books I should have got years ago. Okay, let me get through with these guys, and I'll start going again. Kevin Kelly, WandaVision. I'm not going to get off track here. When it comes to WandaVision, if you're wanting books, I have the books. That's what's funny about it. There's a whole thing about one of the reasons I can't watch WandaVision and stuff is that, and some of the is because I've read the comics, and if Marvel pulls from the comics, I've already read them and they've been done better. And maybe I haven't watched WandaVision since the second episode, but, and I'm probably not going to, but with WandaVision, you want to have to look up these books. Okay. We showed them on Cavern of Chaos the other night on the Friday show, but you have the Yesterday Quest and Avengers, John Byrne's, the book that's popping now, his West Coast Avengers run. Oh my God. There's the Scarlet Witch and Vision miniseries, the second one that was 12 issues around the mid 80s. And I'm sure there's something else. I'm going to stick the topic here, Kevin, but that's just to get you going. For the record, I will not defend One More Day, and since past was even worse. I actually liked Marvel from 5 to 10, with the giant exception of Spider-Man. Oh, 2005 to 2010. Dr. Silver Age, I agree that Marvel seemed to no longer care about continuity. I mean, it's kind of obvious, man. It's just we're finally getting back into a virtual environment where we can finally talk about these things without people attacking people for having different opinions, and then also we're getting to where people like us, Dr. Silver Age, the seasoned collectors and stuff, I think the emotions, if you had any, have kind of settled, and now we can talk about it, calmly. Yeah. And everybody wants to know if you got any videos coming up, Dr. Silver Age. Let them know. Yeah, and then DC's a whole other ball of wax, so I'm not going to talk too much about DC. Okay. Eric, yeah, I'm definitely down for doing a stream sometime in the future. So yeah, I'm down for that. You just get a hold of me. I'll check Twitter every now and then. I've stayed away from Twitter. I don't have it on my phone, but I'm on Instagram as Hallermouse. If you want to try to get a hold of me there too. And that's about it. Okay. All right, guys. So we've been going about an hour, and I think anything after this will just be me repeating myself, me pulling up things to kind of reinforce my opinion on things. And plus, I got to go to work tomorrow. Plus, I got stuff to put in the laundry. Yeah, I've already, the washing machine just turned off a little while ago, so I got to put stuff in the dryer. And that's it, man. I mean, I just want to get that off my chest. Now, in the future, I'm probably going to do a video on what I'm talking about here, and it'll be a short 5 or 10 minute video. I really wanted to do it. So if you see that, click on it. Hopefully I can make it interesting and condensed. This was a good run, man. So thanks for everybody that's popped on here, man. And everybody be excellent to each other, brother. Everybody like, share, subscribe. Let people know we're here and we're talking comics again. Okay. Later, guys. Be excellent to each other.